Repression, that art of swallowing what the unconscious vomits. There are people who wake up early, have coffee, go to work, and are repressed. Others do the same, only with a little more elegance. Repression is a preferred diet of our unconscious, you know? Swallowing what is indigestible, chewing what is intolerable, and pretending that the taste of what cannot be digested is just bad humor. Freud would have said, with his usual Viennese irony, that repression is the gatekeeper of the unconscious. To be more direct, say that repression is the poorly paid security guard who tries to prevent the truth from taking the stage of consciousness. In psychoanalysis, repression is a psychic process by which a representation, usually linked to an unacceptable desire or effect, is pushed out of consciousness, but does not disappear. It only changes its clothes and returns disguised. Repression doesn't kill anything. It only creates phantoms, creates symptom slips, dreams. Forgetting, of course, creates a lot of passive, aggressive post-agency behavior on social media. Freud described repression as the founding act of the unconscious. It's that wall that separates the rational self. It hurt unspeakably, but that wall is porous. What one tries to hide returns in the form of a symptom. And here's where the irony of this thing comes in. The more someone tries to appear controlled, the more the unconscious enjoys doing. Mocking. Knows how to do it. Petty squabbles. Doing. Like a clown, the ego itself. The person says, I don't care about that. That's irrelevant. But you lose. 3 nights of sleep in a row thinking about it. Lacan, who never missed a chance to turn Freud into poetry, said that the unconscious is structured like a language. Well, repression is a silence that screams between the words. It's the unspoken that, like a poorly rhymed verse, insists on appearing in the poem of life. The logic is simple. The person represses what they desire because they fear judgment. They fear guilt. They fear the gaze of the other. But by repressing their desire, a person doesn't eliminate what they desire. They merely displace the desire, changing its location. Thus, every repressed desire, and whoever represses love, dreams of kisses. Repressed anger sickens the stomach. Whoever represses envy becomes a gossip behind the scenes. Yes, there are many of them, and they like to talk in secret. Repression is the most human act that exists, and perhaps it is also the most hypocritical, because it is the attempt to live morally while being driven by moral push-ons. Repression is the pillow of conscience. It softens the impact of truth, but it doesn't let anyone sleep peacefully. Freud distinguishes between original repression, the one that inaugurated the unconscious, and repression proper, which pushes new representations into the same black hole of the unconscious. In popular terms, the first is the first poorly digested trauma of life, and the second is the daily repercussion of all the other traumas we have. We can recognize some modern forms of repression, for example, religious repression. The person preaches a lot of purity and holiness, preaches many rites, a lot of rigidity, but dreams of what is forbidden, affective repression. The person loves, would die for it, but says they don't want to, suffers, but feigns contempt. Intellectual repression, despises the success of others in the name of philosophical coherence. No, I think like this, I need to maintain this persona. Digital repression. They like the enemy's post just to mark their presence, to say, I'm here, I'm watching you, you know? But inside he suffers. Ultimately, all of these are ways of denying desire while living tormented by it. Freud was very categorical when he said that the repressed always returns, and when it returns, it doesn't ask permission. It comes disguised as a symptom, a crisis, an outburst, an obsession. That's why certain inexplicable pains don't go away with medicine, and certain spiritual guilts aren't resolved with prayer and confession, because repression is a shadow of the subject, the shadow of the person, and no one frees themselves from the shadow by running from the sun. When analysis begins on the couch, the unconscious feels threatened. They're going to unmask me. They're going to discover what's underneath this mask I wear. And that's when the frightened patient will say, I don't want to talk about it. That's where the repression resides. What he tries not to say is exactly what governs him most. Whenever someone comes to you and says, I don't want to talk about it anymore, it's precisely this it that's governing that person's life. Repression is a more sophisticated and at the same time more primitive defense mechanism. It protects the ego, but at the cost of freedom. The price of repression is the symptom. Those who repress pay with their bodies, with their affections, and sometimes even with their faith. Psychoanalysis didn't come to cure repression, but psychoanalysis came to give repression a name, a voice, and a face. And I've always told you this, so that people stop pretending they don't feel and start listening to what they feel, which is the true miracle. And here I say, as a psychoanalyst and as a priest, the true miracle is not having wounds, but transforming them into consciousness. In short, it's a complex issue, and I've always told you this, so that people stop pretending they don't feel and start listening to what they feel. Because the real miracle, and here I speak as a psychoanalyst and as a priest, the real miracle isn't having wounds, but transforming them into consciousness. In short, repression is exactly the same, a confessional, only without the priest inside. You'll talk, but nobody will give you absolution. That's repression. And in the end, the silence will continue screaming inside you. Repressed,